Jessica, over to
Yes,
you.
yes, thank you. Uh, Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the global launch of our Go Green initiative. This year, Go Dharmic has pledged to go green. We are working more towards the environment, becoming more and more sensitive as to what we can do to protect the only planet that we have. With this intention, and after weeks of contemplation, we have finally come out with an umbrella campaign which has all inclusive parameters that are needed to protect the environment. And for this, we have with us today Mr. Hemal Randerwala, who is the founder of Go Dharmic, to share a few words from his side. Along with him, we also have Mr. Gopal Patel, who is the Chief Sustainability Officer for Go Dharmic, who is and is also the advisor to the UN. With both of these on call today, let me call upon Hemal to share what he thinks about what we should be doing for the planet. Hemal, over to you.
Thank you, Jessica. Thanks for introducing it. And Gopal, thanks for being here today, and for all the work that you've been putting in over this last few months, all the hard work and efforts that everybody's been putting in. I guess we should start by just informally discussing how we got here. And Gopal, I just wanted to, I've got a few notes that the team's prepared, and we're launching something today for the environment, where we're trying to make an effort for all of our volunteers, for all of our anybody that's associated in supporting Go Dharmic, and anybody else that we can try to encourage to support everything that's facing our environment. But I just want to go back to probably the early days of how we met, and we've known for each other for probably a decade now. So what's your memory at the beginning, like, of how our initial discussions about maybe Dharma or the environment, or do you remember that? I think it was at probably the OCHS, Oxford Centre for Hindu Studies, that we probably first engaged. But then early memories of the manor as well, like this being 10 years of Go Dharmic. I can remember right at the beginning being at the manor together as well, and having lots of discussions. So any thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, thanks to Hemal, and thanks to you, and thanks to Jessica and the whole GD team for putting this together. It's really exciting to be here to launch the Go Green campaign with GD. And yeah, this has been a long journey in the making. Yeah, I remember we met probably around 2009, 2010 initially in Oxford at the Centre for Hindu Studies there, then met also at the manor and different places. And I think what I realized and I saw very early on is within you, and this is what I was also trying to do, was really try to put forward into the world like a positive message of Dharma. That Dharma is not just about spirituality and kind of our own personal salvation and welfare, but Dharma in action, to actually go out in the world and do something good for other people and the planet. And I think that's always been a thread of our conversation over the last decade. And it's so exciting to see it come to fruition in this really beautiful way of the launch of the campaign today.
Just from a personal perspective, like today we're talking informally, but I would love to kind of get your thoughts of how maybe, personally, how did you make that transition? I have a good idea for myself, but how did you make that transition from being somebody interested in spirituality when it comes to, understanding religion as most people understand it, and then that becoming an outcome for compassion in the world, for serving and loving others in the world? How did you make that translation? Because I think a lot of people don't. They stay, within the temple or within the organized structure, not really focusing on the wider world and how they can make an impact.
Yeah, I think like yourself, I feel very blessed that I was from a very early on in my spiritual journey. I would say that it was only when I was 17, 18 years old that I started getting involved or have an interest in spirituality. And I think very early on, I was exposed to people and thinkers who were like a little bit radical, a little bit thought outside of the box. And really from day one, I saw that spirituality meant to be engaged in the world. I was taught that there was a time when spirituality meant to retreat into the forests or to the caves of the Himalayas and that was good and important for a certain time, and it's still good and important for certain people. But for the majority of us, we live in the world. We live in Mumbai or Delhi or London or New York City. We are living in cities and towns, and we're engaging on a day-to-day basis with the reality of the world, going to work, paying our taxes, raising children, taking care of families. And so I was taught that spirituality has to infuse all of that. Like spirituality is not a side hustle, or it's not something I do on the Sunday afternoon between 2 to 4 p.m. But spirituality and Dharma is this thing which pervades everything and should shape every aspect of our lives. There was that I was taught very early on. And then the second thing was, I just had this realization that we have a responsibility. Like for a lot of time, for most of history, Dharmic faith traditions, Dharmic communities were kind of like just isolated in India. And it's only really in the last, I would say, 100 years that Dharma has spread to every corner of the world. That's never been seen before. And I really felt this responsibility, that we have a responsibility to share Dharma with other people, to take the practices and the principles of Dharma and see how they can be applied to all aspects of life, to government, to economics, to development, to alleviating hunger and poverty, and what we're talking about today, addressing climate change. And so I think for me, these were the two things. One was that Dharma has to inform everything, because that's just the nature of it. And the second is that we have a responsibility to do that. We can't wait for somebody else to do that for us. We, as second, third generation Indians who are living in the United Kingdom or the US, or young people in India, have a real responsibility to take this out to the world and share it in a positive, engaged way. So those are the two things that really kind of shaped me from a very early life, very early.
I love that, and I think completely agree with you. And I think I had a similar experience. If I look at somebody like Ram Dass or Neem Karoli Baba and their tradition, when people came to Neem Karoli Baba and would ask him, how do I raise my Kundalini? He would say, go and feed the poor, or help serve others, or, why are you asking me how you can do something for your own self? Go and experience compassion. And through that compassion, your heart will open naturally. You don't need to do some special kind of meditation or something to achieve that state. You need to open your heart and include the whole world in that outlook. So I completely agree that that's been very core to my understanding. And at the beginning, the first campaign we launched was to promote organic farming, and specifically within organic farming to try and relieve suffering for animals in that state. We were working closely with projects to try and find slaughter-free milk and organic farming, and then promoting veganism became very important and crucial, because here in the UK there is no economic sustainable dairy model. It doesn't exist without animal slaughter being in it. People are not willing to purchase pints of milk for £5 or £6 in a mass way. So veganism really became a real valid solution to what we're facing. And I remember our conversation 3 or 4 months ago, when the first thing I asked you, what would be the one thing you would ask people to do for the environment, and your answer was,
it's to go plant-based.
So but why is that not covered? We spoke with Sailesh Rao a few weeks ago, and producer of Cowspiracy, the documentary. Why is it such a difficult topic to talk about, and why is it not really covered by governments or large conferences? Why is it not, when you, as somebody who spent 10 years talking about the environment, and we are trying now our best to put our hearts and minds into mobilizing people to make this world safer and better for all of us, why is it that animal agriculture is the elephant in the room? Why is it?
Yeah, I think it's a good and an important question. And I think what I've seen, as you said, I've done this work now for 10 years, worked across India, Europe, the US, served as an advisor to the United Nations on environment, so I've seen very close upfront, like the climate negotiations, and worked with big climate movements. And I think I think there are two things that have led to us ignoring this elephant in this room, the idea of plant-based diets. The first is that I think for a long time the environmental movement, and it still does, has too much of a focus on external fixes, and looks too much at adjusting the economic model or adjusting the way transportation works or looking at the fossil fuel industry. It looks at these big issues in the world and says, if only we can solve these things, then we'll be okay. And to a certain extent, they're right. We do need to reform our economic models. We do need to switch from fossil fuels to renewable energy, which is one of the campaigns that we're launching today. Those things are needed, but I feel there's been too much of a focus on external problems and external solutions. And what the ask of going plant-based does, it brings the responsibility onto us as an individual, right? I can't say the problem is this company, or I can't say the problem is that industry. I have to take that responsibility that change starts from within, change starts with me, and change starts with 3 times a day what I'm going to eat for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, right? And that's a very emotional topic for most people, right? Food is one of the last things that we have full control over. We don't necessarily control where we work or where we live or so many aspects of our life. But we know, okay, when I go to the grocery store, this is what I'm going to buy. I really want to have this chocolate bar. I really want to have these crisps or whatever the food is that we like. And so food is such an emotional thing for us. And food is also such a strong cultural connector. We think about the recipes that we may cook at home. We may think, oh, these were the recipes that my grandmother cooked and her mother cooked and her mother cooked. And so there's a cultural dimension to food as well, which makes it very hard to talk about changing radically, because it ties up so much into who we are and who we want to be in the world. And so I think these are the two big issues that I've seen when it comes to people not being willing to engage with the topic around plant-based diets and reforming our food systems.
And I also think that with food, it's such a large part of our lives, everybody's life. It's the central part. And when we think about animal agriculture potentially contributing 18% of global emissions, that's not including the transportation part of that and moving that food around and adding that. So when we think about total global emissions and what is actually causing it, you're probably in the region of 40%, which is related to food. And I think when we think about that, then what can we reduce? What can we soften? How do we reduce that? And that's why, today I wanted to kind of go straight into food, because I think coming from the Dharmic traditions, we have a region in the world where, albeit reducing, the largest number of vegetarians exist in the world. And people who have an ancient history of care for animals, compassion for animals, and compassion for the earth in that way. And because of that, you've got that incumbent responsibility even more at this time to remind people and to share that understanding and why nonviolence is important. The Dalai Lama often shares, right, that nonviolence is India's great gift to the world. And he says it so eloquently that compassion and nonviolence are the keys to solving most of the world's problems, if those two things can be introduced in a massive way. And I think with food, it's such a simple choice. It's such a individual, simple thing that we can do right now, today, to take that pledge. So, like as we've done right at the outset of our environmental efforts and put right at the front of everything that we're doing for the environment, is placing a plant-based diet as an essential choice. So together we've launched this campaign where anybody can go onto the site. I think Vidhi will share it in a little while, but we can see exactly how somebody can take a pledge personally and take that responsibility to go plant-based. And I think it's as important as any social action or campaign that people can do, like in their own personal lives and collectively if we're making that choice. And I think we have seen a big movement in that direction. So I am optimistic. I mean, I never thought that, 10 years ago, I would walk into stores and see sections and whole rows of food, which is all vegan and promoting plant-based diets and huge investments. Today, the biggest companies in the world biggest investments in the world are going into plant-based food companies and trying to find sustainable food solutions. And that gives me great hope. But at the same time, I think we don't need to solutionize. The solutions are already in front of us. We need to reduce harm, not to create package or create a more difficult situation, or to create complex solutions. These are simple solutions that need to be put into place. We don't need to develop a new technology for everybody to go plant-based. We just need to eat basic, wholesome meals that we've been eating as humans for thousands of years. One of the things that shocked me, and I'll share this with you, is that we worked with the Department of Food and Agriculture this year during COVID to support lots of vulnerable people. And through that work, we came to know that the average cost of a meal is around £2.50 that is given and allocated to charities for feeding vulnerable people. Now, when we think about that cost of £2.50, and then we think that people on average are probably spending more than that per person per meal in the UK, when there is a lot of child poverty going on, when there is a difficult situation going on, it might be £3.50 a person or £4.50 a person. Now that cost is huge. I mean, if we translate it into Indian money, we're looking at 400 rupees per person per meal that a vulnerable person in the UK that is shelling out for their food, because they may not have a conscious, may not be conscious or have a knowledge of how to prepare a meal for 10p or 15 pence, and how that meal can also be nutritious. So they might be paying £3 or £4 for a meal that's not good for them, that is really bad for the environment, and that is economically really bad for them and their family in a situation where they're struggling. We have families today, like in Luton, where I'm from, as you know, as you're the enemy from Watford. We know that, in Luton, 46% of children are facing some form of child poverty and food poverty. 46, that's nearly half kids in the town, in what is the 6th or 7th richest country in the world, is facing that situation. And when we give people food packs with recipe cards and make them understand that, hey, you can cook a meal for 10p or 15p per person, and for £1 you can feed your family a nutritious meal and look after them, they're quite shocked. And it's an education thing. So I think, how do we do that? Like, what's your thoughts on this thing, developing the world meal, like, that we can produce thousands of meals for hardly anything, and use that as an education point for people to produce sustainable, cheap and nutritious meals. I think this is at the core, like something that's not really being discussed, but should be at the core of our discussion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a really important point, and the statistics you shared about Luton, is the same, in different parts of the UK, and I am currently in the United States. There's large parts of the United States where you have what are called food deserts, where essentially people live in inner cities and have no access to fresh food. They only have access to prepackaged, processed, unhealthy food. So our food systems, as they say, are so broken, which leads to so much poverty, leads to so much unhealthy diets and so on. And I think what's really important, and you hit on the key word there, which is education. And as we're rolling out this, Go Plant-Based campaign today, we're making really sure that we're not just asking people to go plant-based, but actually giving people the resources and the knowledge so they know how to do that in a healthy, nutritious way. because, one could say, okay, I'm going plant-based and only eat, I don't know, Walker's crisps every single day. They may be vegan, they may be plant-based, but that's not going to do much for your health and well-being, right? So, it's not just about reducing or eliminating all animal products in your diet, but it's about replacing them with foods that are nutritious and healthy. And in all cultures of the world, most diets were plant-based. And it's really only, I would say, in the last 70 to 100 years, at least in the Western world, in other parts of the world, we've switched to a very meat-heavy diet. But our grandparents, their grandparents, led very plant-based diets in most parts of the world. And so it's not about learning, as you're saying, not about learning something new, but really just relearning something that our parents or their parents may have lived very normally for all of their lives. And so we're not proposing anything radical. We're just proposing going back to a more sustainable, more of a lifestyle which is in the balance and the harmony with the world. And education around that is really key, which is really great to see that we at GD are going to be leaning into that very strongly, in addition to the actual advocacy and the campaigning.
And I really want to stress as well the emergency of this whole situation as well, that it's not, I'll have to change my diet, or, this is going to be personally affecting me in this small way, or, we have to act as if it's kind of like with COVID, right? Like that many people feel, oh, I'm not going to be able to go and see my friends. It's been 2 weeks that, this has happened, but people are dying outside. So, when that is the either or, then you will change your action. You'll decide that, hey, I can't do this because I need to protect my loved ones and protect other people's loved ones. They're going to die if they get sick from this. We've lost so many people in this situation. And I think that emergency is not prevalent in at least people who live in the cities. I think we fail to understand that and to execute that in a strong way, because if you think about wildlife populations, since 1970 are down 68%, global wildlife populations. And I was born in the early 80s, but now to think that 68% since 1970, we are on our knees in terms of wildlife populations. It's not a matter of just, okay, this is something we can do over time, or let me just, reduce eating this thing once a week or once a month. I think with us and the Dharmic traditions, and especially with Go Dharmic, we've always tried to remain very positive and remain really optimistic, and to share light on things, and not to go with fear-based campaigning or really try to scare people. But we still need to be very loud with our voice and say that this is an urgent thing that we need to do today. This is something that we all need to act upon now, and we don't have the time to really take it so softly. How can we, what do you want to say about that, the importance of acting now?
Sure, yeah. I mean, one aspect of Dharma is to be able to face the truth, right? I mean, Dharma is just to face the truth and engage with that, and not to hide away or to construct alternative realities. And like you're saying, the reality now is that there's like a huge environmental crisis. The UN call it a triple crisis. They say climate change, biodiversity, which is wildlife, which you just mentioned, and pollution primarily of our airs and our oceans and rivers. And so these issues combined are going to devastate the world if we do not urgently address them. I mean, just with climate change, because that's the focus today when we talk about plant-based, we don't realize, because it's so difficult, because these ecosystems are so complex, but a tiny percentage or a tiny amount of global temperature rise affects every single person and every single life form on the planet. If the temperatures of the planet continue to rise in the way that they are and the way that they're projected to, without increased action to decrease carbon emissions, you're going to see, hotter summers, colder winters, more erratic weather. You're going to see people not being able to grow food where they were previously. You're going to see droughts. You're going to see mass migration of people, refugees. You're going to see a whole confluence of issues, environmental, and then the environmental issues then impact on human life and human well-being and stability in countries. And so the confluence of all these issues, they're not fear-mongering. I mean, this is the reality that we're staring down the barrel of a gun. And we need to urgently act individually and collectively to change the way we think and behave and act in the world so we can avert this crisis. And there's no guarantee that we can avert it. I mean, and again, that's another part of Dharma, to recognize the reality of what's happening, but we can make a contribution, right? And I think that's an aspect of Dharma, which is do what we can, like do your best. And if everyone does their best, then we have a shot at addressing this, right?
I agree.
So
I completely agree. And I think, like, if you look at all the great members of what I call the beloved community, like people like MLK and Gandhi, they really stood out for doing it from a place of love. That we don't want to create more noise or more negativity than there already is. We have to light candles, and from that place of love, we can also gain sustenance and energy to doing more work and to doing endless amounts of work from that. Because if you come at it from a place of fear and hatred and say, "Oh, you're eating meat, you have to do that," and encourage, I just want to emphasize that we just have to come from a place of love. That is, Dharma is love, compassion, kindness for all beings, truth, friendship, charity. These are the shining lights of Dharma as I understand it. And I think we really have to emphasize that. And we might not see that from a lot of environmental campaigning, right? We might see a lot of campaigning which is not positive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot of fear-based, there's a lot of pointing the finger, accusing, judging. And that works for some people for a certain amount of time, but it won't take people on a journey. And that's what we need to do with this work, is we need to encourage everyone, start with something and come on this journey with us. Come on this journey of Dharma, where we can all be living in harmony and balance with the world. And as soon as you start blaming and, criticizing, you're cutting people off. And that is not what is needed right now. You need to build a large tent so everybody has a place, everybody feels valued, and everybody feels like they're making a contribution. And I think that's really important. I really feel the campaigns that we're launching today really personify that we're giving people a chance to join us on this journey to reconciling our relationship with the earth and addressing climate change. It's so important that is the heart of this work that we do.
And I think one thing I wanted to mention is that we didn't realize that the thing that we do day in and day out is so important for our climate work. Like our Feed Everyone campaigns, the volunteers have worked so hard and delivered 3.5 million meals throughout this COVID period, and reducing food waste, which is above 40% in the UK. If that can be mobilized and reduced and even brought into law, I wish it was a law that, in the UK, that supermarkets weren't allowed to throw that food in the bin. It was, they create the tunnels to getting that to people who need it in time. That food, like the fact that we have marquees and banners that say "Love all, feed all." Everybody has a right to food. Everybody has a right to understanding those that food is an important part of the environmental campaign. We didn't actually realize how important it was until we actually started launching the environmental efforts and exploring these things. So I really think that when we feed people, when we come together and share food with people, whether we call it prasad or langar or just free food, that creates a bond between communities. It creates love between people, and it builds community in such a way that when those people come together to volunteer, they ask, what else can we do? How can we help more people? How do we warm our hearts in that way? So I think food will remain a very central part to what we try to do in our campaign work and with GD. But I just want to talk about a little bit about, because I've been given notes and I'll get in trouble if we don't discuss this stuff, is business a little bit. And we've launched an initiative last year called the Good Karma Store. And the idea of the Good Karma Store was initially to get people to donate their wedding clothes that have probably been in boxes for years, but cost a significant amount of money, above £500 for the average piece of wedding clothing or item of wedding clothing. And that is something that people wear once and put in a box and leave. And I thought, how can we make that huge industry more circular? How can we make that sustainable? And what we thought was, let's get collections of wedding clothing and get them donated to Go Dharmic, where we then sell them in a shop, probably 20 or 30% of the cost of that item. So we have somebody able to donate an item of clothing that they're no longer using. We're able to give somebody a low cost item who may not be able to afford a new item, but they can buy it from the store at a significantly lower cost and really get a reuse of something that's only been worn once, maybe twice. And importantly, the funds that we then raise from that go towards supporting causes that we're working on, feeding people, environmental campaigning, for us to get to COP and to do our important work, and to for our Go Dharmic team to do the great work that they're all doing. So I think that holistic model that we've tried to create is just one, but there's so many things that, like, I think the private sector is actually most important. You know, that's where the majority of emissions come from. That's where the majority of food production happens. It's all in the private sector. So what's your thoughts on that? Like, you know, private sector, how can we green the private sector when we say go green?
Yeah, it's I agree. You know, the private sector is the largest emitter of carbon emissions, greenhouse gases. And I think what you're seeing increasingly now are businesses, you know, I think they call it the triple bottom line: people, profit, people, and planet, or something like that. I'm not 100% sure. You know, there's ESG, you know, environmental standards for companies when they invest and so on like that. So I think what you're seeing increasingly, a little bit reluctantly in some sectors, but I think what you're seeing are businesses recognizing that business cannot operate for profit alone. It has to operate for people's welfare and for the planet's welfare. And so you're seeing that shift. And I think really over the next decade or two, you're going to see that increase even more so, that profit alone can't be the only mark of success for a company. And so you're going to be seeing even more companies having policies and standards around sustainability, addressing climate change, food waste. I agree, it's criminal that so much food is wasted. 40% of all food produced in the world is wasted. So these things are going to have to be addressed, if not by choice, by force, because the planet is forcing us to change, right? We've known about this crisis for decades, since the 1970s. And really, we haven't really paid much attention to it. But now we're getting to the point where we have to, and we're being forced to change for literally our own survival or the survival of future generations, right? So the planet is talking back to us saying, hey, I've absorbed all of your bad stuff for all these years. Now you need to sort your business out. Otherwise, things are going to get really bad. And I think the business sector, private sector, is going to be one of the key industries or the key sectors, which is going to have to really take a lead on it. And it's doing it, but it definitely needs to go faster.
Right. Yeah. So I 100% agree with you. I think there's huge ingenuity within that private sector as well that can create the way forward as well and pave the way forward. If we want to get away from fossil fuels, if we want to get away from, I mean, just looking at us as a charity, as Go Dharmic, we decided, and you know this because we did it together, to decide not to use plastics in our food distribution, to purchase biodegradable packaging and so on. And as a charity, that was a huge increase in the cost, in the financial cost that our food distributions that we have to pay. But we didn't have a choice. We have to do it. If we cannot be purchasing those plastic containers and standing for that. So making that change happen as a group and deciding to do that was a very important thing. And now with this Good Karma Store business that we're embarking on, it gives people an opportunity to get jobs. it gives people an opportunity to source products that support the most vulnerable people in the world, to support places where they are suffering from the effects of climate change the most, and we can think of sustainable solutions. So I think it was Muhammad Yunus, and he created this concept of social business. And I think social business really has a great role to play here, and we have to encourage the younger generations, the young students who are coming through education today, when they're thinking about what businesses to set up or how to go about their future, to price in these ideas of ethics, of sustainability, of future-proof, so that there is, if you're going into fashion, make it circular fashion, make it vegan leather, make it vegan products. Think about what you can do which causes as little harm as possible. There's a great verse from the Mahabharata, Jalaji, and Jalaji is speaking with Tuladara, and it's interesting because Tuladara is a trader, and Jalaji is a great priest, and but he performs at the time sacrifices of animals, and it's Tuladara who says to him, look, I understand what Sanatana Dharma is. I understand eternal Dharma, and you're doing this thing for money there, or you're getting paid large amounts by these great kings who want great gains for that thing. And the verse that he says is, Tuladara says to Jalaji, I try to cause as little harm as possible. So the path of Dharma is not to cause harm, or to cause as little harm as possible. I mean, with every breath, with every step, we cause harm. How can we cause less harm? What can we do to reduce that impact? So let's discuss non-violence a little bit. How important is Ahimsa? What is that for us, and how can we incorporate that? Because this is when we go to COP, which we'll talk about in a little while, and Glasgow, and when we're making a stand as the Dharmic tradition, or people who believe in the idea of Dharma and sustainability, I think Ahimsa has a very, very core central role to play. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think Ahimsa is probably one of the most radical ideas in the world, and it's an idea that needs to be mainstreamed, into all aspects of our life and our world. It's just, from that one idea that I need to minimize pain and suffering and harm, everything else flows. How we interact with each other, how we grow our food, what kind of businesses we run, how we educate our children. This one idea that I need to minimize harm in the world it's so radical, and it's so simple. And because it's so simple, we overlook it, right? And oftentimes the most powerful things are the simplest ideas: the idea of love, the idea of nonviolence, the idea of treating my neighbor as my brother. Very, very simple ideas, eternal truths, but they get lost in the complexity of the systems that we create in the world. And so I think this idea of nonviolence, it's so central to healing our relationship with the earth, because essentially we have an economic model, we have a way of being in the world today, which is intrinsically harmful. It's a fossil fuel based economy. That means, extraction of natural resources, which means extreme environmental degradation. It means polluting the skies without any thought of the harm that causes. It means it polluting our oceans and our waterways. Our system is based on harming at the moment. We have created that system. And the antidote is, as you're saying, is love, is Dharma. But the essence, I really do believe, is this idea of Ahimsa, of nonviolence. If we can infuse that into all aspects and all spheres of our life, individually and collectively, we would see rapid and significant change. And I just love the fact that GD is leaning into that so much, because it needs advocates. Like I said, it's so simple idea. People overlook it, or people think it's not relevant anymore. They think, oh, that was something for Mahatma Gandhi or Martin Luther King or now Nelson Mandela. But it's an eternal truth that nonviolence is the way to be in the world. And if we can mainstream that in the climate movement and in other issues around the world, I mean, we can see, shifts that we couldn't even imagine.
I 100% agree. And Neem Karoli Baba, when people used to ask him, how should we be in the world? He used to say to him, just be like Gandhi and Christ, and it's, setting that wrong. But what he's talking about is love and non-violence and causing less harm and being sustainable. And I think if once we start really applying non-violence in our lives, every aspect of our life changes. Right. We can measure it, like everything we do, whether it's speaking to someone, how violently are we communicating with somebody, how violently are we conducting business, how violently are we consuming food, or and even if we have to travel a short distance, are we causing violence by choosing to fly somewhere which can be a train can get you there in a short distance? Are we causing violence by not walking? I mean, we might have to walk to the shop, which is 5 minutes away, instead of driving the car there, and that reduces our impact and our load on the environment. But if we see that as an application of non-violence, I think that's a really good and powerful way of looking at the world. Is I'm going to try my best to walk as lightly as possible in everything I do, whether that means in my personal consumption, whether that means in the way I speak to other people, whether that means how I treat other people in the world, or how I travel, how I get from A to B, what kind of event we have, what kind of food we distribute at a distribution, whether we use plastics at all, or whether we do that. I think that's the one question that we need to ask ourselves. And with GD, I've made a conscious choice to, with every campaign, we should apply non-violence to. So it's there. So just like the UN SDGs do give us a framework of something to work towards, where is the application of non-violence to every single aspect of the work that we do, and for everyone that we join? And I think it's not something that most people in the world consider. It's not really the central focal discussion. It's either how do we get around the problem? How do we solutionize? It's not that we are causing the problem. We can do. So I do think that, like Mahatma Gandhi was, through the teachings of non-violence politically, really made a stand for people in a wonderful way, which then Martin Luther King expressed so beautifully, and Nelson Mandela in South Africa as well. But now, perhaps the time for non-violence in today's world is the environment. So we do this thing every year where we cycle on the path from Ahmedabad to Dandi in India. And it follows a route where Mahatma Gandhi walked in 1930 to protest an unjust British salt law, which was charging people 7,000% tax on salt, which was available everywhere. The beach at Dandi is completely a salt beach. It's impossible not to pick it up. But there was a tax 7,000+% on poor people who were struggling and going through starvation. Many people during the British rule of India, and that was a march against injustice caused by colonial rule. Today, I think the injustice is really right now facing us is what we are doing to the environment as people. And for that, so the same distance which normally people would cycle from Ahmedabad to Dandi, this year, as it's COP26, the biggest climate meeting since the Paris Agreement, we've got a plan to cycle that route from Downing Street to Glasgow and stay at any temple, church or mosque where they would allow us a place to stay, and really try to encourage people along the way to take these pledges of reducing the amount that they travel, or to go plant-based in their diet, to make personal non-violence application in their own life, and and all of these other campaigns to educate around the world meal, of how to share a meal with people, which can be a very low cost and good for the environment and good for your own health. You're going to be joining us, right? You're going to be cycling the whole way, or you're going to walk some of it? Are you going to cheat? I'm looking forward to you coming and us to make our way to Glasgow. But how do you feel about like connecting Mahatma Gandhi's salt march that he did in 1930 and today, that being the right cause and the right way for us to do? We're getting a lot of interest at the moment, and a lot of people have said they want to cycle with us and join and make that stand. I think being vocal and making that stand is so important. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, totally agree. I mean, I remember, no, I don't remember, but I've seen the movie Gandhi and I've read the books about his life, and and when he did that, it was again a very simple idea, and the British government and another thought, oh, this isn't going to be effective. It's just one poor man, walking, but it changed the course of history. Just that one walk that he did. And he did it for, like, as you said, for something that was unjust, the way that, the way India was being run at that time. And I do agree with you that for us in our time, regardless of where we are in the world, the environment is the biggest issue that we have to address. There's no doubt about it. And it's an unjust issue, because it means what's going to happen is the poorest people are going to suffer the most. The rich people in the rich countries are going to be able to get away with continue to pollute and not feel the effects as much as, people living in low-lying states or people who don't have access to, certain things. And so the effects are going to be felt unjustly by the poor. And so this is an issue that we all have to rise up for. And the salt ride, or the cycle rally from London to Glasgow is a beautiful way to kind of show our moral outrage at this issue, but at the same time show a solution, which is ride a bike, get on your bike and go for a ride, or take a walk, and as we go, we'll do workshops and seminars, and we'll talk to people and we'll tell them why we're doing this. And so it's I think it's going to get a lot of interest, because again, it's a very simple, powerful idea. It connects back to Gandhi. It's something that everyone can understand, which is that we need to take a stand against this issue. So I'm really excited. I'll join you. If we can just cycle around Luton, not go through Luton, then I'll be very happy.
I'm not sure that's going to happen. We might be break down by the time we get to Luton and have to stay there. So let's see. But another thing with COP26 happening, I think it's important that we also bring people together who feel the same way we do, so we can vocalize. And one of the things with Go Dharmic I've always tried to maintain is it be a borderless organization. So when we feel that there are other people who are walking the same path, we walk together. And through that, we march together and strengthen that voice of what we're trying to achieve together. And anybody that's in our community, we've got over 3,000 active volunteers around the world, and people who have helped so much. They've given their time, their talent, their treasure to serving communities. But I just want to encourage everyone that's been supporting that Dharma is love for all beings. That's what Sri Krishna says in Mahabharata. We have that on our pens, which I have somewhere that we printed 10 years ago. They're still going. But it says Dharma is love for all beings. Mm-hmm. And non-violence is the highest Dharma. For us right now, that is the highest thing we can do to apply for the environment. So if we can embody that and carry that in our community, in how we serve people, how we love people, and it can be any organization. It doesn't matter, what religion or what background or what people they come from. In the end, this is for all living beings and for the whole earth. So I think it's important that we maintain that love all, feed all, serve all idea, and share it with as many people as possible, and really get out there and try and make a difference, to speak to people and to love them through the change, rather than, I never want to be a top-down kind of organization where, there's someone leading and saying, hey, you have to do this. This is us together. And I think Gandhi was that kind of leader as well, that he was from the bottom. He served from the bottom. He went to the villages and walked around and spoke to people and humans, said, how are you? What needs to change? And I think we have to take that approach, civil society organization, and coming together in a decentralized way.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think for a lot of us, myself included, we think, oh, the change is at the top or the responsibility is at the top. But what I've seen is actually the top is very responsive to what happens at the grassroots. And if the grassroots make a noise, if the grassroots start agitating and start mobilizing and advocating for a certain shift in behavior and thinking, the top responds to that. And I think for a lot of us, we lose our agency when we think, oh, it's not us, the grassroots don't have a role, it's the government or it's the big businesses, but it's actually us. We're the shareholders, we're the taxpayers, we're the voters. We have that agency like no one else. And if we can come together the way GD is trying to bring people together, the impact is powerful.
And I think it does work. But the thing that's worked for us is just doing it. Don't wait for some big event or somebody to give you a ticket through the door. Nobody is going to do it. And that's why I admire people like Greta, who just go out and do what they feel is the right thing to do. And we have always tried to say what we think is right and act upon it in that way. So if we felt that, this particular type of ritual is wasteful and perhaps should be adapted to a more sustainable environmental way. Maybe we could use that milk that's been lost as prasad instead of letting it go into a drain, or use water instead and use that as prasad serving out, not to scrap anything or to do. So if people want to enjoy the Ganesh festival, enjoy it, but in a sustainable way, and do those things. And it's never about focusing only on one community. It's for every community. So people are blasting fireworks on New Year's and then speaking negatively about a certain community in regard to the environment. It's for all of us to consider personally, not to speak against any other community in that way. And I think if we all carry again that non-violence in terms of how we apply in our conversation, how we apply that in our volunteering and social action, and as a last point, I want to just request everybody, if you're not already, to be active on the app that we've created. Go Dharmic now has an app where people can come together and communicate and to help each other mobilize these efforts. So whether it's feeding the homeless in a city or location close by you, or serving free food for whoever wants it. I mean, we say love all, feed all. So we don't say, hey, you don't look homeless, so you can't have food. Food is for everyone. You can have it. And it's out of love that we want you to have that and to serve that to everyone. And I think the app for the environmental work, for cycling to Glasgow, for hosting our own event and COP26 and inviting prominent people to be a part of it and to make that change and to communicate that to as many people as possible is important. So as a last point, what's your final message to people that you would like to share to whoever's able to listen to what we're doing and through the Go Dharmic community? What would you like to share? Is, we've invited you. I particularly wanted you to join us as Chief Sustainability Officer with Go Dharmic and help everybody throughout the group engage very carefully on environmental action together and make non-violence the core of the work that we do together. So any final thoughts?
Yeah, thank you, Hemal. It's very kind. Well, it's been a delight knowing you for the last decade, and it's great working with you now and your team and to see what you've built. It's really unique and very, very, very powerful. And I'm keen to see like the potential, to see where we can take it. And my message would be, as you're saying, it's like no one needs permission to do this work. No one needs permission to be an environmentalist, to take care of Mother Earth. We all have that in ourselves. We all have that personal agency. And I would really encourage everyone who's watching live or who's going to watch it later is, go to the app, go to the website, look at our Go Green campaign. There are 3 concrete campaigns that we have, and we're going to be adding more in the future. But we have one on going plant-based, which we've been talking quite a lot about today. But we also have another campaign on going fuel-free, asking people to think about leaving their car at home and cycling or walking. And the final campaign is switch and save. Can you switch your energy consumption over to renewable sources? Can you save the current energy that you're using? So, really encourage everyone to take that personal agency, that personal responsibility to do something positive, which is what GD is all about. Go to the app, go to the website, and make a pledge, and be part of the community that's really working to change the world for the better.
Absolutely, and it's something that Nick Sutton said to me many years ago, that even helping one person or changing one life or one person making a switch is like the whole universe changing. It has such an impact. It's a huge thing. So I don't want us to act in such a way that we need to change millions of people, or we need to do things. Just even one person taking a pledge to go vegan or go vegetarian on the Go Plant-Based campaign is a transformative impact. And I'm really pleased to see that 30 people so far out of the 500 that we're hoping to help make that switch and make that transition have signed up so far. So it's amazing. We'd like to see more people take that pledge to go plant-based and make that transition to a plant-based diet. And then we know that as soon as we hit that 500 mark, we're going to change the meter up and push that up to 1,000. So it's about encouraging people. And I would say two things about speaking up and trying to raise your voice for the environment and creating that awareness, but also being educated about it, understanding what is the science, what is the data. Look at things like the amount of biodiversity loss in the world, or wildlife reduction, or why those glacier bursts are happening, or the amount of natural disasters, or cities running out of water. Educate yourself about those things that are happening right in front of us, and then make those changes that we can do in a non-violent, compassionate way to make a difference. So I'm really excited to do this. I think it's the most important thing we're doing in our lives. And I think this year we're going to put a lot of hard work and focus into encouraging change for the environment, as well as increasing the amount of food distribution. And I would just encourage everyone, look out for this event at the end of this year that we'd like to have, which is Ahimsa, peace, and the environment. So please do download the Go Dharmic app. There's a group which says introduce yourself. So we don't like people to stay passive, speak out. There's a big go in Dharmic, so you must introduce yourself, say hi, and let us know what you feel passionate about and what you would like to work on within GD to help make a difference. So, Gopal, really appreciate catching up with you. It's been a decade. This is 10 years since we've done Go Dharmic, and looking forward to another 10 years of working together. So great. Take care.
Likewise. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.